Integration and lead tracking, and also a credit card processing app for Salesforce. So thanks for coming to the event. I want to thank DataHero for sponsoring, for providing the food and beer.
Thank you,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to show up a little late. And also to Geekdom for providing this space every time. If anyone's a developer and is looking for a place to work in the city, it's a very cool space here. And on the other side, you can basically sign up and become a member. And also talk to me or Geekdom SF if you're interested. The next meetup is February 5th, so basically 2 months from tonight, Wednesday night. So without further ado, I want to introduce Chris Neumann, who's the founder and CEO of DataHero. He's going to show us how to unmask the answers in your data. I'll use your slide. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you much. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So what I was going to do tonight is, 3 or 4 slides, very quick. Nobody likes PowerPoint, but just tell you a little bit about who we are, what DataHero is, and then go right into a demo and show you what we're trying to do. Totally interactive. If you have questions, please raise your hand, interrupt, throw something at me, and we'll take it from there. Not too many things to throw at me, hopefully. Okay, so our goal with DataHero is to empower all of these people to be able to do their own data analysis. How many people in here, just so I get a feel for kind of what you do, how many people are Salesforce administrators? Or, all right. How many of you are people who, at some point in your job, has somebody like this come up to you and ask you to do something for them in Salesforce? How many of you consider yourself to be one of these people? They're really excited sales guys. I don't know. So our goal, quite truthfully, is we want to empower anyone, regardless of their technical ability or complete lack thereof, to be able to actually make sense of data on their own. We're moving into a world today where, as individuals, we each have access to data, and we're increasingly expected to make sense of it, regardless of whether or not our role is traditionally one that is technical. So we could be folks who come from English backgrounds, communication, marketing, biology, all sorts of things that aren't computer science, and yet we're dropped into roles today where you've got access to data in the cloud, you've got access to Salesforce, you've got access to MailChimp, you've got spreadsheets, you've got all of these things, and you're expected to make sense of them, but you didn't necessarily study that in school. So the question is, how do we empower all of those folks who are not traditional data folks to be able to work with data on their own without all of the engineers looking like that? And the way we do that is to understand that people generally know what they want to do. So engineers, we are bred to think that we know all of the answers, and if you didn't necessarily study computer science, you might not know what to do with the data. And when you hear about people talking about consumerization of data and empowerment of data, what tends to happen is the reaction from data scientists and business analysts and data analysts is, no, you can't do that, they're going to get it wrong. They're going to interpret the data wrong. They're going to make a mistake. And usually what we mean by that is really, I don't want to risk giving somebody else the power to work with data, because when they get it wrong, I'm going to be the person who has to clean it up. And so what we really need to do is we need to build tools to empower people who have physical access to data. They have questions they want to ask of the data. They know the questions they want to ask. They just don't know the data process to be able to do it on their own. So the problem really isn't an inability of people to understand data or questions. It's they just happen to not know how to do it, right? The fact that you don't know how to build a pivot table doesn't mean that you can't ask a question that requires a pivot table to get an answer. So, imagine a world where anybody can literally ask a question of a computer and get an answer. But today, for a lot of people, this is the reality of trying to get answers from data, or more likely, something like this. And there's a lot of folks who are traditional data folks who a good chunk of their job is answering questions and creating data and data analysis for people who know the questions, they know what they want to do, they just don't know the process. And so for the past 2 years, we've been building such a system at DataHero. We come from a background that includes both traditional data analysis abilities, but also consumer UI and UX. And what we're trying to do is enable literally anyone who has physical access to data, questions they want to ask of that data, to be able to get answers without having to go through anyone else. So how do you empower anyone to be able to get the data that they have into a system, make sense of it, get answers out, without always having to rely on somebody else? We're not trying to replace data scientists, we're not trying to replace data analysts. There will always be a place for the person in the organization who is looking at data for the first time and trying to make sense of it. What we are trying to do is we're trying to make the entire organization more effective by enabling the people who don't necessarily have traditional data skills to be able to actually go further up the ladder before they have to ask someone for help. And really empower everyone to be self-sufficient. And our goal is, by empowering the masses, we empower everyone to not have to necessarily solve everyone else's problems. And that's what we're trying to do with DataHero. Anyone should be able to make sense of data, anyone should be able to get value out of data, and everyone should be able to work with it without always having to ask somebody else for help. And with that, I'll show you guys what we've built.
Who are your competitors?
Good question.
Dataloader.io or something?
Pardon me?
Who are your competitors? Like, is it Dataloader.io?
The interesting thing is, if you consider what most individuals use as their data platform, it's actually Microsoft Excel. Traditionally, when people think about working with data, the data that they need to work with is sitting in a database, right? So if I'm not important enough to get the data that I want to work with into the database on top of which sits a tool like Tableau, then my only choice is to take the data that I have and start working with the tools I have available. We're starting to see a few tools that are geared at the individual. StatWing is one that does it from a statistics perspective. But still today, Excel is actually the predominant tool. And the further out you get from the traditional data groups, from the BI team, from the Salesforce administrators, the less likelihood you as an individual are to get the data that's interesting to you into that ecosystem of tools. So, oh, it's not even over there. Make sure that, okay, that looks good. So, this is DataHero. DataHero is one of the first entirely online-based, free-to-use data platforms. It's a freemium platform, so you can literally go to datahero.com, create an account, and you can start making sense of data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of how you can analyze data in a spreadsheet first to give you kind of a feel for what DataHero can do. And then I'm going to switch it over and I'll show you what you can do specifically with Salesforce. DataHero, we were one of the first companies to leverage Salesforce's new analytics API that they released at Dreamforce a couple of weeks ago, so there's some pretty cool stuff that we can do in here. Now, there's three ways that you can get data into DataHero. You can take any data file that you have physically on your laptop, so CSV files, Excel files, things like that. You can upload it directly. You can connect to storage services, so things like Dropbox or Google Spreadsheets. You can import those directly. Or you can import data from third-party services, so anything from Salesforce to GitHub to desk.com, which is down the street. And you can pull that data in and you can start making sense of it. So the idea here is you can easily visualize and analyze data regardless of where it comes from.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, of course.
So how does the Stripe interface? Because that's a payment processing platform.
Stripe is a payment processing platform.
So how does that interface with pulling data? Yeah, so because all the others seem to be docs or data repositories, so but Stripe is a...
There's a lot that aren't data repositories. So we have things like, Stripe is one. GitHub is a source code repository. The idea is that there's a lot of services where we want to analyze the data. So Stripe, for example, is an excellent payment processing company. One of the biggest ones, they're used to do subscription services. If you sign up for a paid plan on DataHero, we use Stripe. What they don't provide is tools to actually make sense of your payments. So if I run my business on top of Stripe, I have no way to ask simple questions like, what is my breakdown of subscription versus non-subscription revenue, and see that month over month. So what we do is we pull all of the statistics from all of the Stripe transactions into DataHero to let people ask questions of that. So you can understand your payment history. Or in SurveyMonkey, we are the only data visualization partner of SurveyMonkey. So you can create surveys, largest survey company in the world, but there's no way to ask questions of custom fields that they have in certain cases.
So you allow people to build their own case models, basically?
Yes, amongst other things. So as an example, let's just kind of show what it looks like to get data into DataHero. So I'll show as a simple example. Every quarter, some of you may know, Google publishes a spreadsheet of takedown requests that they get from governments, right? So who sends a request for either a privacy takedown, or you're insulting our government, or whatever it may be. This is an Excel file. We know nothing about it. It's sitting in my Google Drive. So to import data into DataHero, click the button. What it's going to do is it's going to reach out to Google Drive. It's going to import that data, and it's going to analyze it. And what we're doing here is we're understanding everything about the structure of the data. So traditionally, if you try to open a data file, it'll ask you things like, what's the format? Is there metadata at the top? Are there headers? Are there columns? What are data types? We do all of that automatically. So without doing anything, we've looked at this data file. We've figured out where all of the data is. We've figured out that there are headers in that data. We've analyzed and we've understood the data type. So we know that this is a date. This is geodata. Over here we have text data. We can scroll along, we see we have numbers and things like that. DataHero understands a lot of different data types that you'll use on a daily basis. Everything from email addresses and URLs to phone numbers to zip codes to things of that nature. We've confirmed that everything's right. And the next thing we do is we actually automatically generate visualizations for the users. One of the biggest challenges that people have when working with data is they often don't know where to start. So half of the people will say, okay, I've got this data, I know the business question I want to ask. The other half of the people will say, well, I have this data, I know there's an insight in there, but I don't know what to do next. And we try to address both of those. So in this case, I can see here, without doing a single thing, I've gone from uploading a data file that we knew nothing about to getting a map that shows the items requested to be removed by country. So right away I've got this map and I can see exactly who's requesting items that are being taken down by Google, and I haven't had to do anything yet. And from there, I can customize by just dragging and dropping. So DataHero is one of the only visualization tools where there's literally nothing to type. The only thing you can ever type into DataHero is if you want to change the title or you want to change the name of your axis. Everything else is interactive. So if I want to say, see this report over time, all I do is I drag that onto the chart, and we automatically change the chart type. And this is another really important aspect of our technology. Traditionally, if you're trying to visualize data, you use Excel or you use anything like that. One of the first questions you get is, what kind of chart do you want to create? Right? You select your data, you say, okay, I want to create a pie chart, I'm off and running. If you're not mathematically inclined, how do you know what the answer is supposed to look like? Right? This is actually a significant cognitive blocker for non-mathematically inclined people, because they're thinking, well, the question I want to ask, the data I want to put in, not what should the output look like. So we have recommendation engines that for any data that you put into our system will automatically create the most likely visualization to look at. And from there you can customize. So here we have 64 countries. We've picked 8 of them and we've grouped the rest into an all others. I can customize that just by using this slider. In this case they're sorted alphabetically. If I want to sort them instead by the value, I can change that. If I want to filter things out, I can simply click on a checkbox and I can filter and customize my visualization. And then I can even do things like, if I want to change the period, right? So you'll see here that this is grouped by quarter. That was also done automatically. So we looked at the data and we said, okay, it's about a year's worth of data. Let's group that into quarters. But if I want to see that by weeks or some other period, or something really strange, maybe I want to see that by day of the week, I click that, and automatically I can see that for some reason most Google takedown requests come on a Friday. No idea what that is, but that's something that I can go look and start making sense of my data question. So the idea here is we're trying to make it really, really easy for anyone to be able to navigate and discover data. So now let's talk about Salesforce, which is why we're actually, that was weird. Oh, okay. Which is why we're here. Yes?
Do you have any idea what percentage of your default reports satisfy the requirement in terms of the click activity of the users? So your default.
You mean like the recommended ones?
Hey, score. You provided the right report, and everything's happy.
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about that, and that's a great question, is that we actually have several different recommendation engines at play here, depending on whether or not we know anything about the data that's coming in. So if the data that's coming in is from a data file that we know nothing about, an Excel spreadsheet, for example, then all of the recommendations are based on an analysis of the patterns in the data. So the range of data, are there correlations, what are the types of data, and a lot of things that are based on user testing. So for example, if you have a bunch of numbers in your data, and 8 columns are numbers, and the 9th one is currency. 9 times out of 10, the currency is the one people are interested in, so we'll prefer that over other numbers. And we'll do sort of heuristic things like that. In the cases where we know nothing about the data in advance, it's probably about 50%, right? So there's a good amount, but a lot of the time, we don't know anything about it, so we'll iterate that way. On the other hand, if the data is coming in from a service, so it's coming in from something like Stripe, we actually have worked with our partners to understand what are your users asking for. Okay, I'm asking for monthly recurring revenue, I'm asking for churn, I'm asking for business questions like that. So you'll actually see much more complex recommended reports out of services than you will out of just straight up data. And that tends to have a much higher rate of which, yes, that's the right answer, or that's the thing you wanted right away. And then we also feed into things based on, what are the feedback we get. So if you look at Salesforce, for example, you will get a higher rate of pie charts in Salesforce than you will out of other services because sales guys really like pie charts. And anybody who knows Tufta knows that pie charts are the devil's work. So we see very different recommendations depending on kind of what are the services that folks get. I don't know what is going on here. Try not to touch it. Okay, so yes?
Just a quick question. In terms of number of records, is there a limitation where it's kind of choke? Online advertising, for example, you have people work with spreadsheets and millions of records.
Yes. So today, our limit is 10 megabytes, which is pretty substantial for spreadsheets. Our focus is on data at the level of the individual, so we're not looking today to integrate directly with, say, a SQL database that has 100 gigs or something like that. We're looking at files that individuals have. There are definitely some larger ones that we don't support yet. Mostly that actually isn't a fundamental limit in our technology, so we could arbitrarily increase that. It has to do with the trade-offs of how much processing we can do in the browser versus how much we do on the server side. So every time we increase the limit, we end up adjusting those trade-offs because we want to make sure at the end of the day the user experience is very snappy, and we don't want to have an experience where you go to create a chart and you're waiting 5 minutes because it's sending a bunch of data and Firefox or Chrome or whatever is throwing its hands up on it. So, as I mentioned, we're one of the first companies to integrate with Salesforce's new reporting API. And what that allows us to do is enable anybody to access all of the reports they have access to. So this builds upon the reporting infrastructure and the security infrastructure that you have at Salesforce. So if you as an average Salesforce user, I get access to these reports by logging into Salesforce, I'll also get access to those in here. You don't get access to things that you wouldn't necessarily have permission to. So if I want to take a look at a report, I can click on one, like this. And again, same idea. We're going to take that report. So this is something that traditionally maybe you'd export in or you'd start running and you try to do some of those horrible purple charts in Salesforce. We import that in. And in this case, what we have is we are able to understand both standard Salesforce fields as well as custom fields. So same idea here, we're running it through a hybrid classification engine, and we're taking a look here and we're saying, okay, we've got text, we've got numbers, we've got dates, we've got some IDs in there, and again, we've got geodata in there. So types that aren't necessarily only those that Salesforce understands, but as well just custom types that are in there. We click it, looks good, and again, we get a whole selection of charts that are generated based on that custom data. And we look through and we can see there's some maps in there, probability by region and things like that. We've got breakdowns of amount and expected revenue, and this is all going to differ depending on what you have in your Salesforce data. So in this case, how about I show how we create one from scratch? So again, very, very easy drag and drop type of situation. So if I want to say take a look at my expected close date, drag that on. And I want to see, this is going to be the number of deals. I want to see expected revenue because that's what I'm really interested in. And maybe I want to see it by, what stage it's in. Drag all of those on and I can see my chart there. And again, right away we see, okay, here's all of the stages. I want to see that instead by, maybe month because that's what I'm interested in here for this report. I want to see bar chart, and maybe I don't want to see the deals that I lost, the ones that are closed already, just so I can look at that. And maybe I want to just only see, from July on. So again, very quickly and easily, we're able to do functionality which is equivalent to what you might do in a pivot table. So, to accomplish things like this, you'd usually have to export all that data to Excel, build some pivot tables in there, and create those visualizations. And instead, you're enabling anybody to actually do that very, very quickly and easily on their own. So you can give access to, the sales VP who maybe really hates Excel and say, hey, try this out and just make those charts right there. And of course, the next thing you want to do, you create a couple of charts. You want to keep those up to date. So with DataHero, you can actually do scheduled updates and you can keep the information updated. So if I want to say, set this to run every Monday, set it every Monday, email me the report every Monday morning, I'm off and running and ready to go. Or I can update it manually. So, I hit update and it's going to pull in the latest data, it's going to update all of my charts. And in fact, what we can also do is, the last piece I'll show here, is we can actually deal with editing fields in there. So if I were to, let me show one more here and then we'll take some questions. Let's say I want to look at current next 3 fiscal quarters, pretty standard Salesforce report. Got my data in there, looks good. I've got my expected revenue by the owner. That's great. I'm going to go in here, and let's say I'm in Salesforce, and somebody goes in and edits it, right? This happens all the time. Somebody comes in, they change the report. So maybe they add something new in there. Maybe they add the probability that that's being closed. Oops. Let's see if I can put this in there. Do this upside down. Right. See if that worked. Trying to do this left to right is not the easiest thing. Oh. So, anyways, I will not spend more time on there, but if you were to add new columns in there, we can actually understand those as well. So you go in, and let's say you add a couple of additional columns, you update the data. Those new columns will actually show up as data sources. They're not going to break the reports that you've already built. You're able to update those reports, and then from then on, you're able to take into account the new columns that have been added in there. Don't want to take too much more time. Ask for some questions. Last thing is there's a lot of other functionality that we have in here, that I haven't shown today, some more complex functionality. DataHero is the only product on the market where you can literally do drag and drop cohort analysis, which is something that's really powerful. So if you want to look at your data and you want to do things like, show me my pipeline based on when the original opportunity was created, you can create that and automatically get that cohort analysis, and you can kind of see that breakdown of new versus old deals. Or in something like Stripe, right? I want to see where my revenue is coming based on how old my customers are, or how long they've been customers. All of these things are very easy to do, and the idea there is that you can very quickly get answers out of your data, share those answers with your coworkers, and really be off and working without having to be a data analyst. Yes?
You mentioned about sharing. What kind of operations the sharers can do on the data?
So today, and I should be careful using that word, today you can export it into image files. So today you can take any of your charts, you can export those, and you can email and put them in PowerPoint and whatnot. We will, in early next year, we'll have more collaborative features where you can actually send links out and you can start collaborating on things like that. Yes?
What are you actually storing on your system?
On our system, we are actually storing the data. So in order to run all of these operations, I would love to be able to leave it all in Salesforce, but the APIs there don't support the type of mathematical operations we have. We do take privacy very seriously, so if you take a look through our privacy policy, we've taken a lot of I guess nods from Dropbox and some of these companies. Our approach to data is, yes, we do store it on our system. We have a lot of security around that, but it's also your data at the end of the day. We don't do any sort of Facebook, it sits around here until eternity. If you delete data, it's automatically deleted from throughout our system. We have mechanisms where content owners can email us and say, hey, this employee who shouldn't have had access uploaded data and things like that. We also don't look at the data. So we have algorithms that run for statistical analysis and things like that. Our employees will only ever look at the data if you file a help ticket and you click a button that says it's okay for you to look at my data.
So when you say stored on your system, are you using Amazon storage or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes, we're based on AWS.
And just, I know you said the sales executives, any flash in there, the iPad versus tablets, any issues with, it works fine on iPads?
Absolutely. So it's tested on iPads. What we're seeing today is we're still not seeing people do content creation quite to the degree that they are on computers. So like by our metrics, we have fewer than, I think, 6% of our users ever actually access this on a tablet device. But it is something we test for, and it is something that works on. Sorry, I think you have one more back there.
Just Salesforce join reports.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I mean, I'm assuming you handle all custom objects. A lot of us probably have analytic snapshots, but
yep.
in particular, join reports for like in-laws.
I believe those work. So we're still iterating a lot with their new analytics API. So there are some types of reports that the analytics API doesn't handle properly yet. So if we can export it correctly, then we can handle it. But there's definitely a few. You will occasionally, if you try to import something from Salesforce, every once in a while you'll get an error message from us that just says, Salesforce wouldn't give it to us. So there are a few cases where that new API does not work across all reports yet.
Have to try it.
Yeah, exactly. Try it. If it doesn't work, let us know. We'd love to kind of hear all those cases because we definitely don't have the full test suite from them.
So it's a two-part question.
Yeah.
What is your target market? And the second part of the question is, how do you have planned to make money? Or is there a premium in the freemium?
There is a premium version. So for example, the updating functionality, the ability to actually keep your data up to date automatically, that's part of the premium plan. There's larger data sizes and things like that. So our target market is quite honestly the 70 to 80% of people in large enterprises who usually have to go to a technical person for help when it comes to data analysis. The other part of our market is we actually have a lot of technical users where the abilities of DataHero are significant time savers. So for example, we have a lot of GitHub users. GitHub does not offer an easy way to export information on tickets and issues. So if you want to actually do project management on GitHub, it's very, very hard and time consuming. And we have a lot of people who use us to actually project manage GitHub projects, very large GitHub projects. So it's sort of a two-part group in there. In terms of what we're building and kind of where we're going, we're very much an enterprise-leaning company. So if you think of companies like Box and Yammer, it's a product that starts off at a freemium individual product, and we have a lot of individual users. We also have a lot of users in large Fortune 500s and large groups of users in Fortune 500s.
Can you share an example of how it's being used as a GitHub scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of blog posts. For any of these, by the way, we have a fantastic blog, which is written by that woman over there that has videos and charts and examples for everything we connect to. So if you want to see examples of all sorts of Salesforce reports or GitHub reports or things like that. So I'll just open one of these. So we use this to actually manage GitHub issues. So as a ticket tracker, we can look at things and we can say things like, okay, how many issues are closed each milestone? Who are the issues that are assigned to? How many issues are assigned to each engineer? So we'll literally in our engineering meetings take a look at it and we'll say, okay, do we have an even breakdown of tickets across our team? Oh, it looks like this person has too many tickets. Let's adjust that. Or what's the rate of tickets that we had? Did we get more issues with this particular release? Okay, let's go back and let's look at those.
Is there an API available for DataHero?
Is there an external API?
Yes.
Not at this point, no.
Do you plan to in the future?
Yes.
Sir, as far as pricing, is this per user, and can we have a mix and match of premium and standard free users?
Yes and yes.
And how much does it
The premium version today is $29 a month.
So do you do something like a join across services like GitHub and Salesforce, right?
Excellent question. We do not today, and the interesting thing is it's actually not a technical reason. So when we co-founded DataHero a little over 2 years ago and raised our initial funding, it was based on a version that actually did joins across data types. So that functionality actually exists in our product. What we found as we started going out and doing really intensive user testing was that there was a lot of UI complexity in less technical users and getting them to even analyze one data set. So rather than actually do both from the start, we pulled out the join capability and we basically said, okay, we're going to spend the next year and a half really getting the single data set right. You will see the join capability very, very soon. So we're in the process right now of user testing the interface for that, and that's going to be something that'll come on, because that's obviously one of the big things you want to do. I want to join my Salesforce data and my MailChimp data, or whatever it may be. So keep tuned, it's not that far away.
Do you have the Do you have the drill down charts?
The which charts?
Drill down charts.
We do not have drill down charts right now. That's another UI element that we're working on trying to kind of figure out. The aspect with the drill down charts where a lot of the UI testing is coming in is it's not always intuitive what you want to drill down on. And so we're testing different interfaces to enable a person to say, okay, I know I want to drill into this category, but what's the next level of categories that they want to see?
Yeah.
So, Chris, in terms of the Salesforce data, is it just reports that have been created? Or is
Yes.
there,
Today we started with reports. That's a very good question. Rather than going directly against the underlying schema, because our focus from the start was looking at how individuals outside of the traditional technical roles consume data. And in the case of Salesforce, the majority of people that we have using it are not the people who are creating the reports or interacting directly with Salesforce. They're the ones who receive it as the result of someone else. And so you'll see if you go through a lot of the services we use, we actually are intentionally starting with that individual kind of viewpoint and moving upwards. The same thing with, say, CSV files and Excel files. Rather than start with a SQL database, we started by realizing that in a lot of large companies, even people who have access to SQL databases, they don't do it directly. They actually deal with the Excel file that an automated system sends them out once a week.
okay.
But you can definitely expect that as we kind of go forward over the next year or two, that it will start to get a lot more comprehensive in terms of the data sources.
So like an advanced tab or
Yes.
Are you focusing on any particular vertical markets?
That is an excellent question. So the interesting thing with what we're doing, and I think this is very unique to cloud services, is we actually have a proxy to verticals based on the things we connect with. So usually when you think about data products, people think about, okay, are you going after retail? Are you going after manufacturing? Are you going after, what industry are you going after? But in our case, we actually know a lot about our users based on what they connect to. So if somebody connects to MailChimp, I know you're somehow connected to the marketing function. If somebody connects to GitHub, I know you're somehow connected to the product function. So rather than targeting based on industries, we're actually targeting based on job functions and combination of job functions, and we're learning about our users. How is the behavior of somebody who uses Salesforce different from somebody who uses Stripe, different from somebody who predominantly uses CSV files?
But you said you're not looking at the data, so how would you run the analytics on that data if you're not looking at it in the privacy controls?
So we're not looking at the data, but we are looking at what you're doing in the sense of, okay, people with GitHub accounts import data 5 times a week, and they create 3 charts off that. And people with Salesforce data, they only come in every Monday. So we're looking at not the data, but the behavior around it, which is also how we feed the recommendation engines, right? People with Salesforce use pie charts more often and things like that. So our interest is actually not in what is in your individual data, but we're trying to understand, what do people who use GitHub, what do they do? And kind of as we go forward and we work more on these recommendation engines, what we're really trying to build are tools and technologies that can empower people to learn from others. So, imagine you connect Salesforce and, you upload a couple of reports and it says, look, people who had reports with a structure similar to you, these were the types of charts that they created, rather than just being fed off of, kind of a holistic recommendation engine. Or, people who, to his question about joins, people who had Salesforce and Marketo, well, a whole lot of them also used MailChimp. If you add MailChimp in, these are other business questions you can ask. Because as we go even further away from enterprise and we start working, we also have a very large cadre of SMB users who, they don't have a data team. They had hired somebody to set up their infrastructure. They've got MailChimp and, SurveyMonkey and whatever, and they know it should tell them something about their business, but they run a winery or they run a restaurant or whatever. If we can enable those people and use the learnings of the kind of masses to say, hey, look, these are some things you can look at that might help you run your business. That's really where we want to go with this, is really helping people to understand data, regardless of whether that's their traditional background.
So since you mentioned about Marketo, right?
Yeah.
Typically, when you're running the campaigns across channels, you have people feed in their Excel reports manually, and then somebody higher up actually creates a report out of it.
Yes.
But really what they would like is some automated way to track all the channels graphically. But that's not possible today. So.
Not today, but that's definitely where we're going. You know, I mean, we're really focused on, you know, what do individuals within a company want to do, and it's oftentimes, okay, I have access to this company data, but I also have these 3 other things that I want to work with, and maybe they're only interesting to me. So this is my world. How do I enable that? The questions? Yes.
Your data source connectors, is there a roadmap for those? And if you don't, if one of our providers isn't on that roadmap, is there like an open API that you might have partners build?
Yeah, so to his question, we don't have an open API yet. That is something on our roadmap for next year. In terms of where we're going, our addition of which connectors we do is actually based very heavily on kind of what we hear from our users. So we do a lot of user outreach and understand, what are the things that you want to ask? What are the questions and the data sources that you want to work with? If folks want to integrate with us, we have partners who email us and say, hey, would you guys do an integration? And then it just depends, okay, is it technically feasible right now? What you'll see from us over the next kind of, I guess, 6 months is you'll see kind of twofold. You'll see a lot of competitors to existing connections come out. So a lot of what we did, to my comment earlier about how we're targeting, right? We started with, say, one mail provider, right? So MailChimp. And then we looked at, do people who use MailChimp, are they regular users? Is this providing value to them? Okay, it is. So we're going to add SendGrid. So we're going to add Mandrill. So we're going to add other competitive services. If something else, say, people look at and they say, well, we added this and nobody ever used it and they all said it was kind of dumb. Well, we're not going to add all of those competitive services. And then the other thing you'll see is you'll see us move into a lot of larger enterprise services very soon. So things like Marketo and Workday and NetSuite and some of those larger enterprise services.
How many employees are you?
We're a massive 7-person worldwide organization.
And how many customers do you have? I would kind of get a sense of breakdown between premium and premium. Users and customers. Let's say. I mean,
So what I'll just say is if you look online, there's sort of standard bands that people have for conversion rates of freemium products. We fit well within those bands. We're not really disclosing anything beyond that. But I'd say, since we've been out, about 8 months now, we've been extremely happy with our user growth and our revenue conversion. Awesome. Well, the only other thing I'd say is, we'd love you guys to all try it out. It's totally free to sign up. If you are a technical person, try it out. Let me know what you think. Have somebody who's less technical try it out and let us know what you think. We are very, very open to feedback. We're a very, very user-driven company. Anybody who signs up, about a day or two after you sign up, you will get an email from Kelly asking how it went. That's an actual email from her, and we really want to know. So we're genuinely interested in making this a product that really enables people to get value out of data. And we also have some beer to give away afterwards, and we have a whole bunch of awesome Clark Kent DataHero glasses. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, chris@datahero.com, please email me. I'd love to hear from you.